Welcome back to another Service Management Leadership podcast. I have been looking forward to this podcast. I have Adam Griffith, David Billouz joining me. They both have been on the podcast a few times. Welcome back, guys.
Hello.
Good to be back.
And so the reason we're all together is we were the authoring team for the now upcoming, soon to be released ITIL 4 asset management book, class, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to kick it to Adam. Adam, what should we call it?
Its official name is ITIL 4 IT Asset Management, but it is a little bit different from, say, the practice guide, which has essentially that same name as well. But we can get into that a little bit later.
So David, I ask Adam, just so if I misspeak, I don't get in trouble, but if he gets misspeaks, we have it all on, recording. And
yes.
So, we'll make sure that we tell everyone. So it's great seeing y'all. We finished this book a few months ago and had to wait for all the I's dotted and T's crossed to get going. All right.
Yeah.
So let me start with Adam and then I'll go to David. Adam, why was there a need for this? Why, what pushed the people certain Axelos have many projects they could be doing? Many. So why this one? Why asset?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the two products that are releasing simultaneously, so business relationship management is the other, IT asset management, what we're talking about today, both of which are based upon research and indicated demand from the community for these products. Specifically these products, but in general, more from the ITIL framework that is about practical application as well. So less about concept and theory and more about real use case applicability for what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, I won't say something really new about that. I don't know why exactly this topic was chosen, but we will talk about this in the content of the book. It is true that, for instance, you can see in the book that there are some concrete application, for instance, of the value streams. There's a couple of examples of how you can use, the value stream in order to manage IT assets. And this is something that is quite often asked by many people, attending courses. Okay, what is what does a value stream look like? And you have a real good examples in this book, and also in this book you have real good example of, for instance, concepts and how they can be really applied in real life. I give just one example. IT asset management, at the first glance, has nothing to do with governance, risk, and compliance, with GRC concept. But in fact, it's mainly about that. It's mainly about governance, it's mainly about risk management, and it's mainly about compliance. So that's it. In the book, you have a lot of, let's say, kind of concepts that people are still not aware of, that have been crystallized and explained in the book.
So on that note, Adam, I'm gonna throw a fastball on you, okay?
Okay.
Doesn't asset and BRM have a lot of other guidance from other frameworks and other methodologies? Why go down this road?
Okay. Yeah. So what does ITIL contribute essentially that isn't already out there in some way, shape, or form? Yeah. So I think that's a really good point. So two things that I will maybe bring up in response to that. One, it's presenting information that, you're right, in many cases, it's not like we're looking at some sort of revolutionary new way to manage IT assets, because this is a challenge that is not anything that's new. This has been around as long as IT service providers have been in existence. But what we do is we align it to ITIL 4 concepts. We align it to the operating model of the service value chain. But even more so than that, I think that how we look at it comprehensively, holistically, systemically, utilizing the ITIL for the 4 dimensions of service management. So we look at it in a comprehensive way. We look at it from the point of view of the organization itself. How is the IT asset management organized within the organization? What are the particular roles and skills that are needed? What are the information resources, right? Input and output. What are the tools and technologies that can benefit IT asset management? We look at third parties. We spend a lot of time, in fact, looking at suppliers and partners as those assets come from somewhere. And then to David's point just a moment ago, talking about value streams and processes and seeing again how IT asset management contributes to exactly, again, as David was just talking about, so many varied different and necessary value streams within IT service management tactically and operationally, and to a certain extent strategically.
Mhm.
David, anything to add to that before I chime in on my own thoughts?
I don't have anything else to say. I think that yes, this is it about the holistic approach. So you have to have some space in this podcast for you. You are the star. So you know, I mean, yeah. So please, if you want, I can ask you some question. I can be the Jeffrey, and you can be, you know, and we can change the roles. I mean, I have no problem with. So be the Jeffrey today, and I will be the Jeffrey, and you will be the my guest.
You're more talented than I
What
am.
do you think about this holistic approach?
So David,
And what do you
actually,
because of your contribution to the book? Honestly, it's very important for people to understand that you had a very, very important and very, very good. I know. I remember just for that, before we started the book, that you said that you already wrote a book on IT asset management. And when I look at that, I said, so we have nothing else to write, you know, because many things you have already been written by you. So please give us
what's
your
funny about that, David, is David Cannon actually did that. He said, all right, we're going to do a podcast where I interview you. And I was like, uh-oh. So I would also say that it brings in some of the other practices and some of the other guidance. So like Adam was instrumental, I think, on the cloud book. And so we talk about cloud because, you know, a lot of the guidance that's out there doesn't really include cloud as an asset. And, you know, when we think of some of the things that have emerged in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, how about like, how do we treat data? Because data now is maybe an organization's most important asset. And so, you know, how do we take that holistic approach from supplier management and cloud and all this other and put an ITIL lens on it, where some of the other frameworks would just look at it from their framework's point of view, and we're trying to say it's important from this holistic point of view. Is that fair, guys?
Yeah, I think it's right.
Absolutely.
Especially since I threw a plug in for Adam and cloud. But, you know, I think how cloud has changed what we think of as an asset, you know, whether it's SaaS or AWS or Azure or whatever. I mean, it's changed how we think of as an asset.
Yeah, it's not a tangible asset. It's an asset that, because of its intangibility, gets assigned, essentially assigned and deployed differently. It's managed differently. It's recalled and reassigned differently as well. So yeah, I mean, ultimately at its core, it's an asset, but all of the details in terms of how it gets managed are pretty dramatically different. And so, yeah, you're right. That one of the things that I know that the three of us did was we used the practice guide as sort of our original starting point. But then as we look through the practice guide, I think collectively we pointed out a lot of things that needed to be updated about that practice guide to bring this 3-day offering to life.
Yeah, and that brings up a point that, and I want to kick it back to David, who brought up the you know, what's different with ITIL 4. I would also say, David, and I'd get your perspective, but I think asset, when we start doing value streams and we start mapping those within an organization, asset becomes more important, because it's hard to have value streams, that many value streams, without having any asset involved.
Yeah, and also when we were talking about the practices, I think that one also of the aim of the book was to really make item more broader than people think of it. For instance, many times you hear, oh, yes, IT asset management, I have a CMDB, so I know what it is. No, and in the book. We really try to focus on that. The fact that you have a CMDB doesn't make you, comfortable with managing IT asset. And in the book, for instance, we do this. We make this difference between service configuration management and IT asset management. Or for instance, we also relate to some surveys that explain how organizations are really different in their maturity and their approach to IT asset management. Only a third of them, can really feel mature in IT asset management. Okay, so that means that they think about how we will manage licenses in containers, how we will manage licenses in a cloud environment. But, this is about the theory of relativity for a 6-year-old child, for many, many organizations. So you have to understand that 70% of them just don't know how to manage their assets, because they mix up asset management and configuration management. So as you said, Adam, before, the book aims to be very practical. And I think this is the kind of question we really wanted to address in the book.
And on that, David, I'm going to put you on the spot if I may. David has a great diagram in the book. So when you see it, make sure you think of David, where an asset comes into an organization and how it gets brought into configuration management, asset management, that relationship. Do you want to talk us through that, David?
Yeah, we have a lot of diagrams in the book, but for instance, one where we have this relationship is also to understand that how you transform capability to resource and back to capability. This is, in the book where sometimes people say, okay, it's a kind of non-reversible process. You have a capability, a potentiality, that then is used as a resource to deliver services. And that's it. And it cannot be reversed. But when we talk about an asset is a capability to deliver services. Then it becomes a configuration item that is really used as a resource to deliver services. And then you take the decision, so what? I decommission it. I have asset disposal. So if I decommission it, I still have it. I can reassign it to somebody else. So it becomes, once again, a capability. So this is something interesting, that you don't see in many other parts of ITIL, that you can really see, the difference between the capability and the resource in this life cycle. And you can see how they are synchronized, the life cycle of a configuration item and the life cycle of an IT asset. So I think this is something interesting, because it explains things that we already saw in different parts of ITIL 4, but maybe in another approach, or with another approach.
Adam, thoughts on that?
So I think I know what just happened. I think what just happened was, if you see something in the IT asset management guidance that you like, thank David, thank Jeffrey. If you see something that you don't like, then
come on.
Adam was the ringleader. Adam was the ringleader.
Yeah.
I will say that this is the first project. This is the first guidance where I've been involved in a lead editor type role, and I cannot imagine having a better authoring team than the two of you. And you can Venmo me the payments for that statement later. But it's absolutely true. The two of you contributed so much, and that I think is the best part of being a ringleader, when you can just sort of step back and watch the show. And the two of you did again a lot of service to this particular topic.
All right. So before we close, I wanted to bring up a couple things that I found humorous during it, because we all come from different parts of the world. This David over in Europe, Adam on the East Coast, me more in the Midwest of the US. And so there are some words in there that we all took differently, right?
Yes.
True.
And so we had some great discussions about these. What were some of the words, David?
Oh, I remember one of them, and this is this custodian.
Custodian.
When we had the roles, the IT asset custodian. I remember this. And you explained in the US what it means. And honestly, I said, for me, it would be very difficult for people to understand, for non-English native speakers to really understand, and even for you, custodian means something different for people from the UK and in the US. And yeah, so that's an example. and it's still in the book. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of roles that I don't know if you can go to a disco and then you can have your visit card. What do you do in your life as a job? I am an IT asset custodian. Believe me, if you do that in the middle of Europe, you will not be very successful, honestly. But you can try, and then you can say, this is in the book. So then you will be legitimated by this. But yeah, so that's an example of word. Yes, custodian. I remember.
How about you, Adam?
That's a tough question for me, because having worked for Axelos and now PeopleCert, those particular words that sort of become the ITIL vernacular, I have found that they sort of have become natural for me, which is kind of strange. And so to that point, custodian is a great example of moments where we had to take certain terms like that, and we had to live with them to a certain extent, because we didn't want to somehow deviate from the use of that word in terms of kind of standard ITIL vocabulary. But one of the things I think that we did, that we overcame that. Once David raised that flag, then we spent the time creating context around that term. So I'll give you the best example that I can come up with, although again, it's a word that I have found I'm much more comfortable with now, and that's the word disbenefit. It just still maybe sounds a little bit awkward, but once you understand that it's the flip side of something that is beneficial. The disbenefit obviously is not beneficial, but it's one of those terms that we just sort of have fallen into, and we just can't seem to stop using it now.
I got
How about you?
The word inventory for software. People don't really have software inventory, because they have the entitlement from a license, but they don't think this is my entitlement inventory. And so, and also a lot of that, from my point of view, gets lost, because on the software space, we use tooling for a lot of it. And so we usually fall back to whatever our tooling maker calls it. We fall into that trap. All right, last question for you guys. And I'll start with Adam and then David. 30 seconds. Why should people care? Why should people consider taking the class, getting the guidance, that sort of thing?
So I'm going first on this one?
Yes, sir. We put you on the spot. Give David time to think.
Okay. So I've got maybe kind of a few that I'll throw out there. Hopefully I won't take whatever David's thinking of, because that's the danger of going second on a question like this. I think, to David's point earlier, we look at it comprehensively. We look at it holistically. We look at it through not just the ITIL lens, but the lens of other practices. So we look at things like managing cost and risk. We look at monitoring. We look at ensuring compliance. And again, to David's point earlier, good governance of IT assets. We take the practice guide for IT asset management and we enrich it with lots of extra practical recommendations and tools. But I think my favorite answer here is going to kind of be what I think is my favorite part of what we did differently. And that is the inclusion of the ITIL maturity model. So to end the guidance, to end the official book, we wanted to leave candidates with an idea of, okay, I get it, but where do I start, right? What do I do? The guiding principles are great. I love the guiding principles, but again, we want to come up with something that was not prescriptive, but more definitive about how to actually develop this as a capability. And so we borrowed from the ITIL maturity model the capability criteria for IT asset management, and we present them in such a way that candidates can look at their IT asset management practice. They can determine what the level of capability happens to be. They can understand what the consequences or impacts of that level of capability may be on the organization, and importantly, how to reach that next level as well.
He took most of the good answers, David, but I know you still have many left.
No, very impressive answer. So yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I don't have a lot of things to say. One thing I would just add about that is I think that you talk about the fact that the book aims to be practical, but one thing is important. I think everybody should that is managing our asset or involved in asset management should find some good reason to get the book, because in the book we really address different size of organization, different types of organizations, and this is very important, the scalability of the organization. We are talking about governance. Okay, if I am an IT manager with my 5 people in my team, why do I have to buy the book? Yeah, because in the book we talk about you. I am a CIO of a multinational organization. Why do I have the book? Because we talk about you. And that's it. So, you can have this and you can recognize yourself and you say, okay, so what? Then you can follow the rest of the book. And then, as I said, a book in that case is a sort of register, a pointer. Then you can point to other topics, the maturity model, the technical, solutions you can get to improve your asset management, and so on and so on. So you recognize your context and you know where to find additional stuff.
And
Jeffrey,
you guys did a great job.
I am so glad that your viewers, Jeffrey, are getting a chance to have some insight into what the typical authoring meetings of ours look like, right? Where I've got an answer, suddenly Dan has a better answer, and I'm thinking, yeah, he's absolutely right. We absolutely do that in this book. We look at ITAM within an organization that's very small and how ITAM looks different within an organization that is very large. We look at ITAM within an organization that is very centralized and very controlled. And we look at ITAM in an organization where it is less centralized, where it is maybe even fully decentralized and distributed within the organization as well. So yeah, that's a really good answer. I think that was better than my answer.
Maybe. The only thing I would add to both of you is seeing things through the 4 dimensions. Because a lot of times in our asset or configuration or whatever, we get so tool centric. We go in and lock in, but this, we talk about it, vendors and partners. Yeah, we need to see asset through that lens. How about our people and organization? Yes, we need to see it through that lens. Through, tooling and information and technology through that lens. And then the value streams, processes, all of that, we need to see it through that lens. And just the ability to see that one thing that we all are talking about with assets, but see it through different perspectives.
Yeah.
Great.
Guys, thank you all for joining me on this this podcast. I'm glad. I've been anxious to have this because we've known it's going to go live. We just didn't know when for a while. And so it's great getting the band back together. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and week. And Thank you all for joining me.
Thanks, everyone.
you.
Good to see both of you again.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.